Hi, welcome. Today we talk about something different, Star Citizen. If you play video games, you may have heard of this game, either in a bad or a good way, as this title seems to have split the community into two halves. If you have not heard about it, long story short, Cloud Imperium Games and its legendary founder, Chris Roberts, have been working on developing this game for more than 10 years, with more than $500 million donated by players. This is, of course, unprecedented. First things first, what is running in the background is a series of sessions of Star Citizen I recorded in the last 10 years. Yes, in some cases it may not even look like the Star Citizen you may be familiar with, but that's how it started. I've personally streamed or recorded this footage, and I've added a date to mark the development phase. So if you're not new to this channel, you know how I work. Facts, numbers, maths are what I use to back my thoughts and conclusions, rather than trying to clickbait and do cheap triggering content. This reminds me that I really need to make a video about splitting throttles F-14s shooting down balloons whilst inverted. That would surely pass the 1000 views mark. Anyway, in case of Star Citizen, the approach is different. There are no mathematical models or tests to do, so all I can offer is my expertise. I've been coding since I was like 12, and later worked and still working in IT for almost 20 years. I've been part of teams and companies of all sizes. I have teams created around me, and I've seen projects launched, took tons of effort for several months, just to then fail, whilst others flourished. The point of what I'm saying is that I have good exposure to technology and project management. I think at least a bit of background in such topics makes the process of understanding why Star Citizen is both so unique but controversial much simpler. Otherwise, the risk is not understanding the reasons behind the status quo. That being said, although I followed the development, many years have passed, so in case I say something idiotic, feel free to point it out in the comments below. So let's start from the beginning. The Kickstarter campaign went off in late 2012. I started following the project as the campaign was finishing. I then followed the development for a few months, better be informed before spending money, and then pledged in May 2013, 10 years ago, or 3,640 days at the moment of writing. The project gained a lot of attention as the years progressed. At first, seeing a progression of the total pledge of $100,000 was crazy and exciting. Now that sum is collecting on a bad day. There were pledge goals in the beginning for every million collected, something they later dropped as they stopped making sense. I think I joined when about 9 millions were in Chris Roberts' pockets. Initially, the development pace was quite neat. In mid-2013 we got the Hangar module, and everyone was losing their minds imagining how many adventures were waiting for us. In 2014 we got the first iteration of Arena Commander. It was really fun and I enjoyed it for a while. They were a great entree to the main course, which should have arrived in 2015 or 2016. Yes, because that was something close. Should have been the original release time frame. This means that the game is 7 years behind schedule and counting. So, two questions. What happened to the deadlines? And what happened to the $500 million collected? Both are very legit questions, but the answers are more complicated than they sound. Let's start with CR. Chris Roberts is a visionary. He always wanted to make the space game of his dreams, but publishers, stakeholders, and technologies always kept him back. So he started a small project with a bunch of people, assets and an office, made a very cool Kickstarter promo video and braced for impact. What I suppose he didn't expect is that people knew him and loved it so much. For example, I played Freelancer and Wing Commander. I watched some of the films he produced, such as the homonymous Wing Commander, The Punisher or Lord of War. No life-changing films, but some are enjoyable, and his games were really great, in my opinion. I love Lord of War, by the way. Point being, the idea of having him making a game away from the cumbersome presence of publishers was really exciting. So, take the kids of the 90s that grew up consuming his work. Fast forward 20 years, and they are now adults with disposable income, but still chasing the same dreams. This is, I think, a good explanation of why Star Citizen is having such a huge success. No publishers to stop this train running full speed towards something new and unexplored. Only him and us, the backers of his dreams. But everything, dreams included, has to fall back to reality, otherwise it's quite pointless. It was time to build such a train and the tracks, and find a way to the final destination of delivering something great. But do we even know where we're going?
Hi, I'm Chris Roberts. Ever since I saw Star Wars as a wide-eyed 8-year-old, I dreamt of being a hotshot pilot saving the galaxy, or a lovable rogue making my way across the cosmos. It inspired me to make Wing Commander and has influenced everything I've done since then. 10 years ago, after 20 years of making games, I was burned out, so I took a break, but I never stopped playing games nor loving them. And now, I'm ready to come back, and I'd like to show you something I've been working on. But I don't want to build any old game. I want to build a universe. I want to build a game I always wanted to build, but I didn't have the tools to do until now. One that you can fly off a carrier fighting a heroic war on the front lines, but also one that you can muster out and find your own fortune in the stars wherever your spaceship takes you. I want to be able to share this experience with my friends and fight against real opponents in space, not just AI. And I want this to be as good or better than any other game out there. And I want to actively push the boundaries of what you can do in a game. None of this would have been even possible 2 years ago. But with Moore's Law driving PC performance and cost, and the gaming community embracing talented developers via crowdfunding, I believe it is possible today. I've never been accused of having a small vision.
The last sentence is a little hint to one of the major issues of this project. At the beginning of time, there was a small project for a small game. I think the initial team was composed by 10 people or close to that. As the money poured like rain during a monsoon, Chris probably realized he could turn his initial project into something bigger. As more money came and kept coming, the promised features skyrocketed, the complexity kept going up exponentially to the extent that the technology required to deliver such a project was not even existing. Even worse, the team did not exist. As anyone who had the often ungrateful task of selecting, hiring and training a new team, this is no little effort. It takes time, a stupidly long amount of time to do that. People have to be selected and get familiar with the procedures of the company through onboarding and training. Although, for example, CAG acquired talents from the bleeding Crytek, they still had to integrate them, even create offices for them. This is one of the most misunderstood points of this project. You can have a semi-unlimited amount of money, but the time to build a team is not going to improve that much anyway. Especially when on top of everything we place a perfectionist like Chris Roberts. So, as mentioned, CAG started with 10 lads. Guess how many work for them now? Well, over 700 from 5 major locations around the world. Then there is the problem of having the technology necessary to build such a vision. As Warren Buffett said, you can't produce a baby in 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant. Things take time, and there were so many setbacks. For example, the company had to remake the engine in x64 because the 32 did not give them the precision necessary to handle distances. When they had a contract with a company called Inphonic tasked to create part of the FPS assets and gameplay, something ended at some point and a lot of work was redone. There was even a lawsuit between Crytek, creators of the famous CryEngine, and Cloud Imperium Games. Many of these solutions were then developed and remade multiple times. For example, some plants have been remade 3 or 4 times. I lost count. For a person not familiar with IT, this process may sound like a waste. But this is normal when creating a solution that has to be future-proof. The result, in fact, was improved every time, with every time more features aimed to making the process quicker and better for the future. With the recent patch 3.18, they have implemented part of what will allow full persistence of entities in the Star Citizen universe. To put it simply, the idea is that you can leave a bottle on a certain planet, log out, forget about it, and someone else may find it a long period after. It's not a new concept, but it has a ton of applications and gameplay loops. Imagine, for example, a ship crashing. Someone may loot the crash site, or just salvage components and materials. The place can go forgotten for even a long time, as the original owner may not be able to return to the place. The implications are really unlimited. When the first iteration was released to the openly accessible public test universe, or PTU, it ran cache. When it hit the live servers, the L broke loose and many players were unable to join the game at all. Welcome to the life of an alpha backer in an open development. So, to recap, some people like to point out how much money Star Citizen collected, but again, between setbacks, feature creep, creation of new teams, and even physical offices, R&D, implementation of technologies and features, improvements and overhauls, time and money go away rather quickly. This is very different from many other games. Any game created by an already established software house already has an advantage of several years over Cloud Imperium Games, and this advantage is greater the bigger the project, and not many projects can compare to the scale and goals of Star Citizen, even keeping Squadron 42 out of the equation. Okay, stupid example. Imagine rebranding a football or any sports team versus building one from scratch, starting with only a couple of players and a coach, and having to find players, a stadium, gear, sponsors, and so on. Are you starting to get my point? It's not easy, especially if the expectations and goals are constantly shifting. If the team you're assembling to compete in the minor league suddenly has to aim at winning the Champions League, then it's quite a change. Next, the technology problem. Games like FIFA, PES or similar come out basically every year or every few years. In between, they improve textures, animations, invent a feature or two, and so on. A lot is done on the shoulders of the previous year's work. Changing genre entirely, take Call of Duty. 19 titles between major releases and expansions have been released in circa 20 years. The game mechanics are pretty much always the same, with some variations through the years. Graphics and style obviously are being constantly improved, but again, a lot of work is based on experience of the previous years. When we talk about Star Citizen instead, we talk about something totally new. Yes, there are many other space-themed sci-fi games, but this adds more on the flavor or artistic aspect, if that makes sense. Some core mechanics are obviously inspired to other games and films. Mining, for example, is not really a new concept. However, as we discussed, the combination of tech features and details, it is something entirely new. There are no comparable previous titles they can use and learn directly from. Let's consider games that have required long years of development. Of course, we can't make a one-to-one comparison. Games have different purposes, features and so on, but it's just to give an idea. Besides meme-level titles such as Duke Nukem Forever, Red Dead Redemption 2 took about 8 years of development by a tiny and unknown company called Rockstar Studios, under the hat of Rockstar Games. Yeah, the same tiny company of GTA and many other games. And by the way, GTA 1 and 2 were the best. Fight me. Now, imagine them starting from scratch with 10 people, increasing the number of employees to at least 70 times, actually building offices, shifting development goals, and all the stuff we said before. Yeah, I guess we should attach 4 or 5 more years to the 8 of actual development. And the scope of Red Dead Redemption 2 is still much smaller than Star Citizen and Squadron 42. Now, it goes without saying that delays are not entirely due to the long development time. Here are a couple of examples. There have been cases where the perception led to point the finger towards bad management. There have been cases of poor communication, especially in the past. Some deadlines were promised and broken so very often, and so on. For example, Theaters of War sounded incredibly close, but then vanished. That could have been handled a bit better, probably. Others point their fingers at the so-called feature creep, or the uncontrolled and mismanaged sprawl of new aspects and features that ultimately push the deadline's continuity ahead. The thing is, it's so much better to set realistic expectations rather than missing deadlines. Some backers also contest the development structure of Star Citizen and would prefer something closer to Elite Dangerous, who releases aim at introducing finished and polished features gradually as they are created. When it comes to the actual issues of the game, such as bugs or various critical levels, it is hard to avoid chucking everything under the "it's an alpha" carpet. Personally, I never saw the inability to log into the servers or crashes as a problem. It is part of the development. Heck, I had a colleague kill the production database once, stranding 1 million customers for 2 days because he messed up the restore of the backups as well. And none of these involved any development, just something akin to, well, clicking the wrong place at the wrong time. Imagine instead playing on a game that is clearly labeled as alpha, bit on a scale not seen before, with technology being implemented as we play. Things will go wrong. When it happens, it's a matter of waiting a few days or weeks, then they tend to improve. This is an aspect that so many players do not understand. This is not the typical early access you can find on Steam, with an approximative release date implying that most of the features are completed and the beta phase is running. No, here we are much further back, and we are actively paying to fund, but also test the game if you decide to play. This topic is of course more complex than that. For example, the so-called veteran backers and the old Kickstarter backers pledge something totally different from what we're getting 10 years later, so their complaints lay on solid ground. Therefore, the last few points are more applicable to new or recent players. After so many years and so much visibility, it is surprising, so to speak, how many do not understand the status quo, nor read the many disclaimers Star Citizen shows the user. You know, the one that you are forced to acknowledge so often. This reminds me of 14 players in DCS insulting Jester, because it is a poor RIO without realizing that Jester is just an interface, and if it sucks, it's mostly because you're doing it wrong. If you're interested in this game, you can try it for free during the free Fly events that occur a few times throughout the year. Those tend to be not the best time, however, as doors are spread open to griefers as well, and the servers tend to be quite under pressure. As mentioned, there are game-changing patches that can break the game entirely, sometimes just for hours, sometimes for days. That do not happen often, but usually by the time a couple of hotfixes are deployed, the game is quite stable. There are bugs, however, everywhere. Dealing with them is a game within a game. Sometimes it can be incredibly frustrating, for example when you are transporting precious cargo and the server dies, or you can't complete a mission because something breaks. If you do really hate when this happens, then this game, in its current state, may not be for you. If you can't find the patience to keep calm and carry on, you will love this. Again, Star Citizen is not stable. This is a constant you have to remember. Sometimes it is also good to take a step back and play something else until the situation improves. Star Citizen, on the other hand, provides an experience no other games give you. The seamless transition between the bed where you spawn and the spaceport and your ship, then up in the air and in space, and finally to any destination you want, it is something else. It reaches the pinnacle of fun in my opinion when playing with friends. Perhaps just 2 players in a Constellation or a Catalyst, or half a dozen in an Hammerhead. The Hammerhead gave me one of the greatest moments in gaming. The day it was released, I spawned it and flew it around with a bunch of friends whilst flying at quantum speed, so imagine a sort of speed of light from many other sci-fi games. We were interdicted by a bunch of pirates. I immediately called everyone besides the pilot to jump in a turret and started blasting across the emptiness of space to take down the pirates, and it was glorious. So, is Star Citizen worth it in 2023? Sure it is. But you need to understand what you're getting with your money. A beautiful experience, an incredible game tech-wise, infinite freedom, but also a lot of bugs, and potentially mediocre performance even on capable hardware. If you're not sure about pulling the trigger, wait for a free fly event. Just in case you're not satisfied, CIG refunds any pledge for the first 30 days. That's plenty of time to find out if you like this game or not. As everything in life, inform yourself before opening your wallet. Last thing before wrapping this up, the code you see in the video and in the description below is my referral code. If you use this, or you use anyone else's code, when you create your account, you will receive a bunch of in-game alpha currency credits called alpha UEC. I will get instead a sort of token, and the more points I will get, the more bonuses I should receive. Fun fact, I have like 4 of them, although I have introduced at least 50 people to the game, but I did it long before this program was launched. Oh well, what can you do? And by the way, there are players online that sell alpha UEC on eBay at similar. Do not buy them, it's wasted money. As the name suggests, this currency is tied to the alpha and wiped now and then. If you want alpha UEC to see a big ship or play in a multi-crew one, give me a shout, and I'm happy to accompany you. There are many other topics I could talk about, but I'd rather leave them for another video. Hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you have any question, you know where to find me. Thanks for watching and take care.